Second. Okay, so welcome everybody to the November 18th Insider Mastermind. Really excited about tonight's program, as I'm sure all of you are, with our wonderful Gaylene Baker, my infection control expert friend. Masterminds are for talking and for listening. What I want to do, though, is we're going to do things a little bit differently than I've done in the past, and that's I want everybody to feel free to ask questions and for us to have a discussion, but I'm going to ask all of you to mute your microphones until you have something to say, okay? Because we picked up a lot of extraneous noise on our last meeting, and we don't want that to happen and disrupt everybody again. So this is a continuing education activity. This has a 1 AGD PACE AGD credit for it, and in order to get that credit, I need to have you again mute yourself, but put your name into the chat box. The only way we can keep attendance is by your first and last name in the chat box. I do have your email address, and we will email you your CE certificate shortly after the meeting is over, because that's what Patty Beeson is trying to keep track of, is everybody that's here. I can see, I'm going to kind of read down the list. I can see that we have, along with Patty, we have Susan Cotton, Annalie Picotte, Barbie Lynch, Carolyn Dubois, Chitnina, okay, I don't know how to say your name, Dr. P. I'm going to call you that. Christopher Grimes. Eve, can you put in a last name? Because it helps if we have the last name even in the other part. Of course, our wonderful Gaylene Baker, our speaker for tonight, Jane Nugley. Jeanette Miranda. Oh, Jeanette, we haven't seen you for ages. Karen Kamisi, welcome. Thrilled to have Karen's always point of view. Catherine Palulo, Kimberly Melgalwi, Layla Christensen, Lindy Pavel, Lisa Simonson, Michelle Race. Hope you're feeling. Do you finally get rid of that cold, Michelle? You had that nasty thing for so long.
Glad yeah.
Finally
now I got pain in my neck.
Oh, there's so many lines I could say here.
Literally.
We have Nicole Fortune. We have Nicole Marchesi, Noelle Paschke, Rebecca Van Horn, Rhoda Kabliskas, Samir, Sandy Rago, Sandra Berger, Sharon Liebich, Stacy Holt twice, and Suela. Now, some of your names I'm very familiar with, lots of you, of course. Some of you I think are new, and you might not be insiders. Insiders is masterminds are an insider benefit, so I'd love to have you join us as far as being a member. We have, if you're not an insider yet, again, you can join us anytime. Again, our course description for tonight is water safe. We need to know it is, and Gaylene's going to talk all about it. I want to mention a few things, though, before I get started. If I could disappear this thing on the side, which I don't know how to do. Okay, that's not how it works. All right. On Monday, our newsletter will come out. The Dental Codology newsletter comes out every fourth Monday of the month. And one of the things that's going on, I'm really excited about, is with Thanksgiving coming up here so quickly, the Oral Cancer Foundation is wants our help with their Giving Tuesday. The details of it are going to be in the newsletter, so watch for that. Come to your mailbox on Monday. When it comes to dental codology, there's 3 parts to this brand, and one is the speaking and books that I write. The other is our inside membership group that you're participating in here, and the other is our online curriculum. Our online curriculum continues to develop. You'll be hearing more about that in the next couple of weeks. One of the things that's really exciting is part of the insider group is also our Dental Codology Consortium. That's the group of people that are proactively working to change the way the codes work right now. And one of the ways the codes work is right now, hygienists, assistants, and office managers, only people that really have a say in the codes committee are these groups that you can see listed there. Well, one of the goals of the DCC is to get someone on the coding committee, and in that light, tomorrow morning, first thing, Patty Beeson and I, with Ann Petrell from ADHA, are meeting with ADA to have a discussion exactly about that. And in preparation for that reading, I found a rather interesting quote about the Code Maintenance Committee. And one of the things that says the Code Maintenance Committee was established by the was established to ensure that all stakeholders have an active role in evaluating and voting on CDT changes. Everybody on here, we are all stakeholders. Therefore, yes, we should have a vote. So we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. So we'll keep you up on the progress of that happening. One of the things that we've been proactively doing is to really show that we are interested in this is submitting ideas for codes. One of those is the enhanced oral cancer screening code. As you can see right now, in the comprehensive evaluation, the periodic evaluation, see that there's a part it's scratched out that we've chosen to scratch it out of those general descriptions, because the part that's problematic is the word that says where indicated. We think there should be a specific code for enhanced oral cancer examination. And the reason I'm bringing that forward is in that light, we have a very special speaker and wonderful presenter next month. Our mastermind next month is by Dr. Susan Maples. She is a new insider with us. And if you've ever been to AOSH, the American Academy of Oral Systemic Health, you might have heard her there. She's very dynamic in her thinking about what we can do. As you can see by the name of the course, it's our turn to act. And so she's going to talk to us about some of the new tests that are out there and how we're going to act on them, how we need to act on them. Now, the insiders we submitted our codes. The DCC has submitted our codes to the code committee, and those will be decided next March. But our decision and our work is not done. We meet on a regular basis, and our next meeting is not till January, but then in January we start meeting every 2 weeks to discuss all of the submissions that go before the CMC. If we want to have a role on that committee, we really want to understand it all. Anybody and everybody is welcome to attend those meetings. The calendar for everything is on the Dental Codology website under the events tab. There's a full calendar there that has course descriptions, that has all these dates, and I did get it updated till about mid-year next year.
Patty?
Yes?
Go back a slide, please. That says 2019.
Okay, then I have to, no, it is 2019.
No, go to the next slide.
The next slide.
You've got your next mastermind meeting is January.
Oh yeah, 25th. It is the 9th to 19th. It's in 20. 1/5/20. You're right. I just changed the first part and I didn't notice the second part. Thank you, whoever found that. I will can fix that later. So it is, but it's on the calendar, right? I know it's for next year. So thank you. Now, in order to, again, get CE credit, we need to have your name in the chat box. I got to change that picture because the chat box looks different now. As you can see, your CE certificate is already ready. I need your full name in there. Patty, are they getting them in there? Are you able to keep up, Patty? Patty? Apparently she went off microphone. Well, let me introduce.
Turned off my microphone. Yes, some of them are, but some of them have not.
Okay,
so please,
I cannot issue the CE certificate if I don't have your name in the chat box. That's my official record for the American Academy of General Dentistry. I have to keep meticulous records in order to keep my certification, so we need your name in there so I can give you the CE. Now, by way of introduction, this whole infection control subject, I'll be honest, for me, I'm one of those yawn, yet in the reality of the world is it continues to change. And one of the ways that it is changing a lot is the number of people with allergies. As you can see, the statistic there that more than 50 million Americans have experienced various types of allergies each year, and it's the sixth leading cause of chronic illness, is something that's very, very real in my life. This is my medical history. This is my health history. And you can see the number of medications that I'm on. You probably are looking, boy, you got dry mouth. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And the variety of practitioners. But look at the center section at the number of antibiotics that I have either questionable or I'm allergic to. I've had the experience of actually anaphylaxing twice in the last 2 years. It's not a lot of fun. And the idea of we spray this and we use that and we have all these products out there, all of the things that go into the atmosphere, all the aerosolized products can be a problem for people with allergies. Because, see, people with allergies can be both immunocompromised as well as immunosuppressed. Immunocompromised is my condition. My system, I actually have something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and I'm just telling you about this because I'm just pretty typical. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an immune system dysfunction of my thyroid. I've had 3 sinus surgeries, multiple antibiotics, which I think contributed to those allergies there. Yet the medications that I take to help manage my allergies suppress my immune system. We have many patients. You saw the numbers there, 50 million people with allergies. Here we are in the fall season, although we've had snow here in Chicago a few times already. But anyway, is people say, oh, I have a fall cold or I have a summer cold. It could be something more than that. And if they're taking medications, whatever the OTC, over-the-counter medication they're taking, affects them. It affects their ability to fight off everything. And it makes what we do for infection control, infection protection, that much more, as well as what it makes a difference for ourselves. Now, my latest crazy one was when I was diagnosed with hypersensitivity pneumonitis. That was the diagnosis that I got after a really whole bunch of things and medications and issues that I had that put me on 2.5 years of prednisone. So what did that do to my immune system? Well, the reason I have the birds flying there, what that has to do with it is they said the hypersensitivity pneumonitis because I had an exposure and I'm highly allergic to pigeon poop. Where's that on the health history? Yeah. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up is the setup for what Gaylene's going to talk about is because it's such a very real thing for me. In the book, the box there, you can see that's a book that I did on an ebook that I did. In the chat box, if you go scroll back up in the chat box, you will see what I've done is I put a link there that you can download that's a written that's an online ebook CE, but there's also a course that goes with it. But that's what's cool is we have, though you can go to those courses, but you can also listen here tonight to Gaylene. Gaylene Baker is a friend of mine that I've known for quite a few years. I met her when she was moving from her clinical career, her long time clinical career, into the world of corporate dentistry. And in her most recent work, she's moved over and she's working with my friends at Air Techniques, the makers of the Monarch products. I was so thrilled that I said, I know who we need to have for our speaker. I know what course we need to do. And so that's why I was thrilled that we could have Gaylene Baker here. She's got along with her clinical dental hygiene degree, she's also got a bachelor's degree as well as an MBA. She's quite talented, gifted, and I'm sure we're all going to learn a lot from what Gaylene has to say. So at this point in time, I'm just going to hand things over to Gaylene, and Gaylene, just tell me when you're ready for me to change the slides.
Right. Well, thank you, Patty, for that introduction. And yeah, I became a butterfly finally after attending my first career fusion back in, I think that was 2010. So I'm now a Monarch, so very good. But Patty is right. As healthcare providers, it really is up to us to make sure that our equipment is working properly and that we're taking measures that are necessary so we don't cause any harm to our patients or to ourselves as clinicians as well. Next. In dentistry, we really can't get away from using water either. And we need water to cool the drills for the high-speed handpieces, to cool our ultrasonic scaler tips, and to rinse away debris in the mouth. But before we get into why we really need to treat dental unit water lines, I want to talk a little bit about what determines safe water. Next. So the EPA established the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it is a federal law that protects public drinking water supplies. And under the Safe Drinking Water Act, standards are set for water quality. And water quality, one of the standards that they set includes a CFU count. The current standard that is acceptable for CFU count is 500 CFUs or less per milliliter of water. Next.
I'm working on it.
Okay. So I guess I want to ask you guys, do you know what CFU is or what it stands for?
Anybody?
Colony forming units.
Yes, very good. Colony forming units. So CFU is a microbiology term that indicates the amount of heterotrophic or living microorganisms total in water. And the number is determined by counting the individual colonies that can actually multiply and then potentially cause disease. Next. So research has shown that in just 5 days, a dental unit line can reach CFU counts of 200,000 per milliliter or more. So 500 per milliliter is acceptable according to the EPA Safe Drinking Water Act. But if you don't do anything to stop the biofilm growth, it can get to 200,000 or more in just 5 days. And when we look at this, everybody looks at the one, especially the second one from the left as I'm looking at it, and they're like, oh, gross, it looks like a worm. And what it really is just all the biofilm that's filled up in the water line that when something's been put in the water line to break it free from the tubing and flush it out, it just took on the shape of the water line. So it looks very much like a worm. But the funny thing is there really are worms inside the biofilm. Next. The biofilm actually contains nematodes. And nematodes are a simple structure worm. They have a digestive tract that just runs from the front, the back. So they're called a tube within a tube. And high concentrations of nematodes will make the water taste bad. And free-living nematodes can carry pathogenic bacteria in their gut, such as mycobacterium. And we're going to talk a little bit about mycobacterium a little later. Next. So the question is, if we start with EPA safe drinking water in our dental units, why do the water lines grow biofilm? Well, it's because the water lines remain moist and warm. They have periods of stagnation, a slow flow rate, and they're dark. So they're really a perfect storm for the growth of biofilm. The biofilm also begins to adhere to the walls of the tubing.
Sorry.
So, well, it's okay. They take on the shape of the tubing like we saw before. And as they get more and more advanced, they continue to produce that protective polysaccharide slimy layer, and that allows for the collection of even more microorganisms. So over time, some of the microorganisms will break free, and then those become those free-floating heterotrophic microorganisms that will find a way into the patient's mouth. And that's where they're going to be able to cause harm.
Gaylene, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
You've used the term heterotrophic a couple times. Can you explain what that is?
So a heterotrophic microorganism is one that is free-floating in the water, and it's capable of reproducing and causing disease.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions? Again, don't wait for a moment. You can ask questions as you go along, because if you're like me, like right then, it's like, okay, I heard it twice, I need to ask now. So please feel free if somebody has a question. Okay, go ahead, Gaylene.
Gaylene,
Okay.
thank you for explaining the worm thing, because I can't even look at that picture anymore. Patty flashes it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's disgusting. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I will have nightmares about the worms in our lines. Yuck.
All right, so we'll go to the next slide. So sometimes when you think about it, this guy's drinking water might even be cleaner than the water that's in the dental unit water lines if they're not being treated properly. Next. So what is the problem? So the problem, we talked a little bit about all of the disease-causing microorganisms that can break free during patient care and enter the patient's mouth. Next. It started recently in September of 2015, where 20 children had recently received pulpotomies at a Georgia pediatric dental clinic, and they required hospitalization due to an infection that occurred. Investigations revealed a direct link between the infections of those 20 children and the contaminated dental unit water lines at the pediatric dental clinic. Next. So this slide shows a letter from the Georgia Department of Public Health stating that the source of the infection was determined to be the contaminated water in the dental units. The water at the clinic was tested, and it was found to have an average CFU count of 91,333. So they were doing pulpotomies with 91,333 CFUs per milliliter of water on average. So it's just a little more than the recommended 500 per milliliter.
So they're basically taking the water, spraying the water out of the air water syringe into this open wound that the abscess had caused, and it has that level of bacteria. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, when we talk about it, a lot of times in endodontic procedures, endodontists use sterile, freestanding sterile waters when they're doing endodontic procedures because they're permanent teeth, whereas deciduous teeth that you do pulpotomies on are not considered permanent, a permanent structure in the mouth. They're going to come out. So they don't necessarily use sterile, freestanding water. All right, next. So if that wasn't enough, you'd think that after it happened once, it made national headlines, it would never happen again. But in September of 2016, so not quite a whole year from the first incident, it happened again in Anaheim, California, once again at a pediatric dental office following pulpotomies. Next. At least 10 children at this location were hospitalized after complications from pulpotomies, and the complications were similar to the issues at the Georgia Dental Clinic. Investigation took place from the California State Department of Health, and again, it was determined the cause of the infection was due to contamination of the dental unit water lines with the same Mycobacterium abscessus. One of the health officers actually reached out to the Anaheim clinic and required a complete replacement of their water system and a written plan for taking care of the issues. But what I found interesting here is the symptoms actually didn't begin until 15, all the way up to 85 days after the pulpotomy. And this picture really illustrates what Patty was talking about earlier, is they were taking contaminated water and actually introducing it right into the bloodstream, into an open wound in the mouth. And I don't know about you, but have you ever gone to the dentist and you leave and you're like, oh, I was under so much stress, I was having work done, I had to hold my mouth open and everything, and then you get a little sore throat and you're like, oh, I'm getting a cold, or I'm getting, I was just stressed out, or it's the season. Well, maybe it was a cold, maybe it wasn't a cold. Maybe it was something to do with the water lines, because as a patient, you're sitting there, like Patty said, you're sitting there and you're breathing in all of the aerosols that we're creating, whether we're using a high-speed handpiece or ultrasonic or our water syringe. All right, next. I thought this was interesting because this was a interview that was done on CBS This Morning News, and I just got a screenshot of it. But what I found interesting about it is, number one, the person that was being interviewed chose not to be identified, and number two, what he says here is, I think there's been a lot of high staff turnaround and they weren't following protocol. And the key here is they weren't following protocol. So there were no systems in place to identify that the water lines were being maintained properly. And that's why the CFU counts were allowed to get out of hand and actually cause disease and damage in these children. All right. Next. So before I talk about this a little bit, can anybody identify what this structure is at all? So it's a little blast from the past, and it is the Bellevue Stratford Hotel in Philadelphia. And the significance of this is in July of 1976, it was the location where the American Legion held their annual 3-day conference. And they were there for a bicentennial celebration for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That summer it was unusually hot. And on July 27, 3 days after the convention ended, a 61-year-old American Legion member died from, they thought it was from an apparent heart attack. But by August 2nd, there were hundreds of the American Legion members had become sick, and 22 of them had died. And at the end of everything, it reached 221 American Legion members became sick, and 34 died. And what happened was a CDC microbiologist identified an organism that caused the illness. And it was something that had never really been seen before, and they named it Legionella. And so now we call this Legionella disease. And the significance of this really is that it was a really hot summer. The air conditioner, cooling towers were running, and they were producing a mist. And Patty talked a little bit about, people that are vulnerable to diseases, and you can be immunocompromised, but elderly people are very susceptible to diseases as well. And the members of the American Legion happen to be a lot of elderly people. Next. So that Legionella microorganism does grow very well in dental unit water lines as well. And I wanted to mention this because it really isn't an infectious disease until it becomes airborne. And what we do in dentistry is we aerosolize the water. And if it's containing that Legionella, we're going to expose our patients to that microorganism. As clinicians, we can also be exposed to that microorganism as well. But during patient care, we at least have a mask on, and we're protected from those aerosolized microorganisms. Like I mentioned earlier, it likes to prey on compromised populations. So the elderly, the very young, the immunocompromised.
I want to ask you a question, Gaylene, that I think harks back to work that you've done in the past. But let's talk about the integrity of those masks, because they lose integrity over a certain period of time in use, don't they?
Yes, they do. So if you're producing a lot of aerosols and you have a longer appointment span, you should have a mask that has an ASTM level 3. And as soon as the mask becomes wet, or within about 20 minutes of use, you should be changing your mask.
Okay, you used some letters in there that I could have sworn you said ESPN, which I know is the sports channel. What were the letters you used, and what do they mean?
Oh, ASTM. So ASTM is an acronym for the American Society of Testing Materials. So they test and validate that the level of mask that you're wearing is actually doing what they say it does.
Aren't there certain masks that are better recommended for procedures? Certain masks are made just for some, evaluation procedures versus ones that are using when you're using a water source or whatever. Can you expand a little bit on that for us?
Right. So the longer that you have a procedure with the patient, and the more water or spray that you're going to be producing, the higher the ASTM level you should be wearing. So if you're doing a simple exam check, or you're just taking an impression, or you're taking x-rays or something like that, you can have a level 1 mask or just a regular barrier mask. But as soon as you start to produce fluids, you should, at the minimum, move up to a level 2. And if you're going to be working for 20 minutes or longer, which most of us always do, you should move up to a level 3. If you're going to be working for a considerable amount of time, you should consider changing your mask during the procedure even.
Is there a way to tell? Is it just time that evaluates? Is there any way that we can evaluate the integrity of our masks, or is it just the time thing that we use mostly?
Time thing. And it really is, they won't tell you, the CDC will say to change it up within 20 minutes. So if you are not sure if your mask is capable of protecting you, then just change it in 20 minutes.
And that's funny that you guys started to talk about this, because I just had to talk to my office manager regarding her purchase of ASTM level 1 masks for the entire office. I'm like, we got to change that.
Yeah, yeah. They're okay to use, but maybe not for your long clinical procedures or where there's a lot of water that's being sprayed. And most of our procedures now, we use an ultrasonic device on almost everybody. So we're going to be producing a lot of aerosols.
Yep.
Gaylene,
Yes.
just as an aside, the whole Legionnaire's disease, my son worked for a large hospital system, and they had someone who came up with Legionnaire's disease. They couldn't figure out how. Well, it turned out they had a fountain in their main lobby.
Yeah.
And that's what they found as the source of their Legionnaire's disease. And the president of that hospital system wrote a letter to all other hospital systems close by in the vicinity to warn them that if they have a fountain, they need to, if not monitor it, they need to do something for it or consider taking it out because of the danger of Legionnaire's disease. I don't know if they did. It's not just our water lines either.
Well, that water is being recycled through a water line, and then it's being aerosolized, and as people are passing through, they're inhaling that microorganism. So it makes sense that that would happen.
In a hospital.
Yeah. Hot tubs produce, if they're not cleaning the lines properly in hot tubs, they'll grow the Legionella, and of course, as soon as you turn it on, it atomizes the water and puts it up into your breathing space when you're sitting in a nice warm hot tub too.
Okay, do you want me to go to the next slide, Gaylene?
Yes, very good. So again, so we talked about Legionnaire's, and yes, an 83-year-old woman did die after contracting Legionnaire's disease from a dentist. It happened in Rome, Italy, and the reason that we know that she actually contracted the infection from the dental unit water lines at the dental practice she was visiting is because she only left her apartment 2 times within the incubation period of Legionnaire's, and both trips were to the dental office. They did a genetic sequencing of the bacteria in the dental unit water lines, and they actually matched the bacteria that was found in the lungs of this elderly patient as well. So, not to try to scare everybody, most people don't get really sick like this, but these are potential outcomes that can happen. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to make sure that we're delivering safe water for our patients and for our patient care. Next. So some of the things that we can do to prevent infections associated with water lines is to follow the manufacturer guidelines on how to disinfect the water lines. We want to make sure that we are monitoring the quality to make sure that our bacterial counts don't exceed the 500 CFUs per milliliter. You can use point of use filtration. Those are good to remove hard minerals from the water, but they don't necessarily remove microorganisms from the waters. And there's lots of different types of treatments that we can do. Of course, we want you to use independent reservoirs or actual bottles that you fill. And one of the reasons we want to use water bottle systems is because if there ever is a problem, we know where to isolate that problem at. Also, we can treat the water in the bottle so the lines are treated. There's different types of treatment. There's chemical treatments that can be done intermittently or continuously. They treat the whole office. sometimes, and automated devices as well. We want to make sure that we always start with a good source water. So if the water is really hard, has a hard mineral content, you might want to use another type of water, distilled type of water. Next. One of the things too is we need to make sure that we're always testing and validating that we're producing the 500 or fewer CFUs per milliliter. There are a lot of companies out there, or a lot of products out there that will say you put it in, it's good for this amount of time, you don't have to do anything, it's not in our IFUs or whatever. And there's nothing that will ever validate that it's actually working properly if you're not testing the water. You should have a testing protocol set up in your office for how to test your lines to make sure that you're actually achieving a water quality that is acceptable by the EPA and the CDC, which is at 500 or less. We actually would like it to be even less than that. And you can do testing. It can be chair side, where you use like the paddle test. I don't know if any of you have ever seen those. Or you can send it into a lab where they will actually give you an exact CFU readout. So they will say the source in room 1 had a CFU readout of 175. The source in room 2 had a readout of whatever. But they actually give you a report that you can keep in your records that validate what your readings were. If your readings ever do exceed that 500 per milliliter, you need to shock the lines. So we need to do something to remove the biofilm that's growing in those lines and to get it back under that 500 CFU per milliliter.
Gaylene, with these tests, you have one marked as a screening, the other as a test. Is there one that's more valid? And if there is, are there any specific requirements for an office that we should be screening X amount of this often and testing this often, so to speak?
So it depends on the state you live in, and I'm saying that because I know California was getting ready to implement mandatory testing, and I don't know if they have done that yet. So you have to know what your state regulations are for that. But a screening, I would consider that also a test, the paddle test. And I think the reason they put it in as a screening is because it's more difficult to actually read. You're reading it yourself. You're counting those little grid marks to determine if you pass or you fail. Whereas a laboratory test is going to actually give you a distinct number of CFUs, so you know where you stand with that. But both would pass as a test, the screening. Now, if you did a quote unquote screening with a paddle test and you feel like you were like on the line where you might be passing, might be failing, then I would definitely recommend that you send it off to a lab to validate that.
Okay.
Okay, next. Okay. So this is just a test that the Monarch brand did on, that Air Techniques did with the Monarch brand. And it was a test that started with a shock. So the Monarch product can be used as a shock and as a weekly treatment. So they first did a shock. A shock with the Monarch brand is you use it every night. You run it through the lines, you leave it sit, then you flush it out the next morning. And you do that every night for 3 weeks. And then,
did I miss the definition of shock? What a shock actually is?
So a shock is a treatment for the line that is going to remove any buildup of biofilm in the line. And it depends on what product you use to shock and how it's done. There are some products that you can shock for 3 nights. There's like our product where you would shock for 1 night for 3 weeks. You know, so you have to follow the instructions for the shock. But a shock is to really remove the biofilm that has built up on the lines.
Is that measured by the tests, or how do we know when it's built up on the lines like that?
So the test is measuring the free-floating microorganisms. So it's not going to tell you what's built up on the lines, but in order to get free-floating microorganisms, you have to have a biofilm that's built up on the lines.
Okay.
Okay, so they started here with a shock, and then they did the treatment, which was once a week, and they did this for a period of time. And it just shows that this product was really great at keeping the CFU levels down at the under 500 CFUs per milliliter. And what's great about the product too is that it's just a safe product to use as well. Next. So when you do determine what you want to utilize for your waterline treatment or shocks, you want to make sure that it's an FDA and EPA approved agent that is a germicidal agent that's capable of being used in your dental unit water lines. I've been in a lot of offices and they're like, oh, we just run bleach down them, or we do this or we do that. And I'm like, so where is it? You know, that where is it stating that this is the amount of bleach, this is how long you're supposed to use it, this is, you know, whatever. So use something that's actually been approved for healthcare providers. So this isn't a place to cheap out on that. Again, you also want to make sure it's compatible with the equipment. One of the things with bleach is it's very caustic and hard on the equipment as well. So you wouldn't want to do that. Want to make sure that we're not using anything that's harmful to us or to our patients. So no hormone disruptors or carcinogens. That the contact time for really great effectiveness is doable. pH of the product should be neutral ideally, so it doesn't cause any damage to your equipment. And make sure that it's not going to interfere with any of your procedures, like the bonding of your composites in the office, the cost, and how it can be utilized. And is it time efficient? Does it work into your nightly, your weekly, your monthly protocols? Is it something that you can do on a regular basis and have it be effective? Next. And then this is, of course, the product that I represent here with Air Techniques is a Monarch Lines Cleaner. It is EPA cleared to be a shock and a waterline treatment, and it does keep the CFU count down below the 200 CFUs per milliliter. So it's only one product. One product can be a shock and a treatment. Once a week for the ongoing treatment, of course, you would want to work in a waterline test at some point, and then that is really up to each office too. It is once you establish that you are achieving your waterline protocol, your goals for under 200 CFUs per milliliter, then how often you test the lines would be up to you. If you have a new staff member that just starts, that's in charge of using water lines and doing the treatment, maybe you would want to test the lines again because you have a change in your staff. Or if the office was closed for a week and you're on vacation, maybe you would want to go right into a shock and do a shock and then test again. You know, so you have to think of those things because they're different for everybody. And that's where it gets really confusing with waterline maintenance as well. So the Monarch brand is a chlorhexidine glutamate. It's safe to be used. The worst thing that can happen is the patients might get a little minty taste in their water, but that's it. Right. Next. And that's it. So you just have to keep calm and Monarch on, everybody.
I love it. This is Karen. I have a question.
Yes.
So I understand how to use the Monarch line cleaner because that's what I personally used when I had my practice. And I've gone around speaking because I speak on water safety, and I have a lot of people that use the Steri-Straw, and they tell me that the dental rep tells them they don't have to test their water. And how can that be true?
Telling them that it's not in their instructions for use.
I'm sorry, I can't
We can't
understand.
hear you, Gaylene. We lost your connection. Try again, Gaylene.
Can you hear me now?
We can just barely hear you.
Oh, they didn't give me a microphone. Is that better?
A little, but not much.
So I'll talk real close to the computer. What is happening is the dental rep is telling them they don't have to test because it's not in the instructions for use of the product, and that is true. It's not in the instructions for use of the product. However, like I said before, once they put it in, how are they validating that they're really achieving waterline quality if they're not testing to validate that? And things change, things happen, products fail. And if they're never testing, they can't validate that. So I would never recommend that they put it in and forget about it. I would always recommend, like, at the minimum, when they change them out, they should test. And then they should test sometime throughout the year as well to validate that everything's working accordingly.
But
Yeah, well,
go
they'll
ahead.
use that dairy straw for a year, I think, don't they?
They do. So how do we know that when you're at month 10, that it's really releasing the right amount of antimicrobial in the lines? Have any of the microorganisms become resistant to the product that they're using? I mean, there's all sorts of things that come up that they really need to think about testing the lines and having a line testing protocol regardless of what they're using.
Yeah, and then I always suggest people have it written down, and that's part of your monthly maintenance is testing your water and recording your test results.
Karen, I think you've hit into something that's really important, important point of what I talk even about codes. And codes are one of the ways that we measure things. And if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And that holds true in so many ways. It certainly does here. Because again, us making an assumption that it's still working, having no record of when it was done, time seems to pass. It's funny how our patients come in and they say, well, I was here 6 months ago, and you look and it's been, a year to 5 years ago. Or you even think something is 6 months ago and it's a lot longer. So I think that again, measure it to manage it. And
yeah, and I
a
think
validated test.
The office in Georgia, I think one of them had the Denipure system, but there was a bigger problem. Am I not correct? Like one of them already had a system in place and still had a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think everyone should test monthly.
Like we can't hear you. I think, Gaylene, we were trying to say something, but we didn't hear you. I know. Anybody else have comments on this about the testing part or how you're doing it in your office or what you find that's been working and worked successfully?
This is Jeanette Miranda. I have a question. So does every room then need to test?
Gaylene?
You would choose where you're testing. You would either choose, so maybe this time you're testing the air water syringe in room 1 and another item in room 2, or you're testing all 3 lines in room 1 and 3 and 5, and the next time you test the other ones. It's ideal to test the water lines that are the least used. And if you have a whole office system, the water lines that are the furthest away from the water line treatment system. And yes, I see, Dr. Eric, your ozonated water is great. It is. They have to buy an ozonator for it. But yeah, it works very well.
Eric, you're here. Can you explain a little bit about that to people that don't know about ozone and ozonated water? Eric, are you listening? Eric. Dr. Eric Strunsky is one of our insider members, and he's an expert and presents on ozone and the value of ozone. And there's so many ways that we can use it. Oh, he doesn't have a microphone. Oh, I wanted to give you the microphone. Maybe I should we can have you do a whole program on it, because I think that that's something that I know when you talk to one of our groups from DC, one of our DCC groups, about the potential that we have for using ozone in so many ways in our practice. It kills. Here's what he said: ozone kills bugs. So it disinfects. So anyway, that's another aspect. I know that came up when I was speaking in California, that there's offices and practices unity, and as Gaylene was mentioning, there are different standards that were put into place. They were voted into law at about this time last year in California. What's gone into place and whether they have the rules for them yet, I haven't read that either. So anybody else have questions for Gaylene or comments about your own situations in your offices?
I would say that at the very least, Monarch Lines is a chlorhexidine glutenate. It's something we give to our patients to kill microorganisms in the oral cavity. So it is also something that I consider it safe as well. It's not a chemical that is really harsh, that can't come into contact with oral tissues. It can actually even be used in your ultrasonic scaling devices for irrigation purposes if you wanted to. So,
what, the lines cleaner itself?
Yes, 1 ounce to a quart goes right in there.
Interesting. Any other comments? Any other questions? All right. One of the things, too, that's going to be in the bulletin on Monday, we have some specific, if you want to link to that study that was completed by John Molinari. Of course, that's in infection control world. That's quite a name. They also have a special going on, their year-end special, that you can order the product and get one, you buy 3, you get 1 free. Also, there's a link if you want to have a lunch program in your office. That's all linked. Is all going to be in the into our small bulletin on Monday. So, any other final comments or anything, Gaylene? Are you good?
No, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Okay, so put on your calendar our next meeting, our next Mastermind is on Monday, December. I can't see it underneath the thing. You guys can see it. I can't. Anyway, December 6th or 8th or something. Anyway, it's again Dr. Susan on oropharyngeal cancer, our epidemic, and it's time for us to do something different. And again, a big key to that, as we were just talking about there near the end, it's about the tools that we have to measure so that we know how to properly act. And the thing about a measurement tool is it's good for, yes, to help discover problems, but it's also a good measurement to see if we resolve the problems, having a way to measure it. So again, Dr. Susan will be talking about that next month. Please put it on your calendar. Also want to again mention all of these meetings are recorded and they are for continuing education credit. If you miss one or you want to go back and retake one, we do have continuing education questions on there so you can get an hour of CE. They're all available through the Insiders, Dental Codology Insiders portal. So thank you to Gaylene. Thanks for your time. Thanks for putting this together. I'm sure this is really helpful to all our participants. And I want to wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving, happy, healthy, thankful Thanksgiving, because I truly appreciate all of you. We're really making a difference. Again, I'm really excited about our opportunity tomorrow to talk to ADA about getting a voice on the coding committee, and I hope to report some good things to you soon. Also, those of you that have been involved with the DCC, we do have our first stages done and submitted to ADHA, Institute for Oral Health. So we'll be telling you about the grants. It's going to be an educational travel grant that we're putting together. More about that later. We are up to changing the future. We're charting the future. Also, I'm really excited. It's my newest, my latest passion. In the newsletter, you'll see that there are 3 different articles and links about artificial intelligence. Where is dentistry going? Where is healthcare going with the use of artificial intelligence. We're up to charting the future. We're up to controlling the future and changing the future. Thank you very much for being part of the future by being a participant here. I wish you all a good night and a very happy, healthy Thanksgiving.